Small is beautiful. Here's a quick, short overview and review. My own thoughts. I'm not a trained economist, but I do love reading little economics books and trying to make sense of them. I got some notes here. I want to share my thoughts on what I liked and didn't like about this book. And if you think this is a book that maybe you want to read. Apparently, this was a pretty popular book a long time ago when it came out. I think it's from the 70s. And his whole sort of philosophy, Schumacher, interesting guy. I mean, I guess he was Christian, but he wrote like Buddhist economics and some things like that. He was to be found in Buddhist monasteries. And I saw one quote. I watched a couple videos of him too, just kind of curious to learn a little more, where he said, if I'd named Buddhist economics Christian economics, no one would have read it. So that's why he named it that. But small is beautiful. And the main idea, if it has a main idea, is that we have become detached from what's going on when you get past this human scale, the small scale, where your work is really right in front of you. You see the results of it. You see the results of your actions. And so you can respond to the results of your actions right away and immediately. And so you can enjoy something like a cup of coffee that I made myself. Whereas a pencil, the economic example that everyone uses, or pin factory from Adam Smith, it's like thousands of people making one tiny little part, and no one actually knows how to make the actual pencil itself. I'm just paraphrasing a bit. I'm going to get into it. I went through it pretty quick. I'm probably not going to do it perfectly justice, but I want to dive in. Chapter 1, I'll kind of look at a couple chapters. The problem of production. I like this chapter. He talks about how one of the most fateful errors of our age is the belief that the problem of production has been solved. So this idea that, we just fixed that we've escaped the Malthusian trap, that we can just now produce whatever we want, and now it's just about leisure. And this is something you hear people talk about with the AI revolution, that we're in automation, we're all going to lose our jobs, but we're going to be happy, right? We're going to just be unemployed, own nothing, and just be happy because we've solved it. We've solved it. And that's one of the things I like about this book, or any economist, is I like the economists that are realistic and not wishful thinking. And he does a little bit of wishful thinking. He kind of flip-flops, in my opinion. If I'm reading him correctly, he flip-flops from being realistic to being idealistic. And I think that's kind of one of the main distinctions of economists and economics in general. There's the economists that realize, hey, the equation has to be balanced. That's what economics is. Whenever there's a trade-off, if there's a cost for a benefit, you're facing a trade-off there. And you have to balance the equation. And then there's the economists that are basically like, how can I justify whatever it is that I actually want, using some magical hand waving and wishful thinking, so that I can make it seem economic to actually give me what I want. And that seems to be this entire school of economics, or mainstream economics to a great extent, if you think about all the crazy COVID spending that we've just gone through. Like, where's that money coming from? Oh, we just have money all of a sudden to just spend on this thing. We'll figure that out later. But don't worry. The problem of production's been solved. So, we'll just keep doing that. Why don't we just keep buying stuff? And so that comes to another point, which is consumption and hyperconsumption, especially, which is kind of the age we live in, the age of hyperconsumption. And he talks about oil, fossil fuels, fuel in general, and it's dated. He's part of this kind of like fossil fuel petroleum scare, like we're going to run out of resources. It's 50 years later now. And I think, what was the book I read? The Skeptical Environmentalist, Bjorn Lundberg, if I'm saying it right. He did a great treatment of that concept of we're running out of resources, and he showed how that's been a fear that's been going back hundreds of years. But that's not to say that resources shouldn't be treated as scarce, because every resource is limited and scarce, and that's one of the points he makes. So I agree with him on that point. It's just a little dated and a little bit extreme, maybe. I definitely agree. So one of the things he says is that we shouldn't be treating fuel as income; it's capital. And I like that distinction. I like the distinction capital versus income, whereas income's like just this thing I'm getting. Hey, the earth is just paying me to be me, and that's sweet. And, because I'm so amazing, I deserve it probably. Versus capital, where it's like, this is a precious resource that we can use it, but what are we using it for? Are we using it to make things better, to prepare ourselves for the future? And so getting out of that consumption mindset into the capitalization mindset is something that I'm always a huge fan of in economics. So I agree with him there. What does he say? Oh, in one of the interviews I watched, he said something like, the point isn't to maximize consumption. That's ridiculous. The point is to maximize satisfaction with the minimum amount of consumption. So how do we consume the least amount of our resources for the most satisfaction? Chapter 2, peace and permanence. This I like it here because he kind of attacks Keynes a bit. Keynes, the most prominent of mainstream economics these days. So anyone who attacks him is a friend of mine. Not that he was entirely wrong. I'm not going to get into that, but Keynes, I guess, he has this great quote. I don't know if I'm going to find it right now, but basically Keynes saying, we have to be greedy and usury and things like that. They're probably good for now because they're getting us to this next stage where we're going to have wonderful peace and prosperity and permanent forever and ever. We're just not there yet. So we have to kind of be unethical right now to get there. And there's probably some Keynesian who's going to hate me for paraphrasing it so badly. But this idea that there's this idea, we can create peace if everyone just has enough in their life. If their basic needs are met, they're going to be more peaceful. They're not going to steal because they don't need things quite so bad, because they're not starving, and they're not going to fight wars over territory because they don't need those extra resources. Like, if we can just get everybody to have enough, oh man, it's going to be so peaceful. And so that's where it dips into the wishful thinking, and that's where he refutes it. And so again, I love that he's bringing realism here to that wishful thinking. There's so many things that are just wrong about kind of assuming that would be true. But he does a great job of that. Next thing I marked here, I thought would be an interesting little piece to get into, because he talks about responsibility then, and this directly relates to the title, Small is Beautiful, where he says here, he's talking about the market. The market, therefore, only represents the surface of society, and its significance relates to the momentary situation as it exists there and then. There's no probing into the depths of things, into the natural or social facts that lie behind them. In a sense, the market is the institutionalization of individualism and non-responsibility. Neither buyer nor seller is responsible for anything but himself. So I think the point he's trying to make, I'm going to try to parse this out a little bit. The point he's trying to make is that in the moment of interaction, I'm not taking into consideration anything else but this this exchange of value. Is that thing worth the thing I'm giving for it? And if you are poor and you're starving and I'm taking your last thing of whatever, that's your job to decide if that's valuable to you for the thing I'm giving in exchange. So I just worry about myself and you worry about yourself, and that works at that human scale. And this is the scale we work on. This is the scale that most people's, their intuition really functions at, the human scale. And in a way, that's a good thing. And he's kind of not necessarily saying that here. So this is my own take, is that that's a good thing, because that's what allows markets to calculate prices. And so that's where all of that beautiful information in the marketplace is exchanged right there. I don't need to know everything about everything that's happened. All I need to know is this valuable to me? And everything else is calculated. And it's like this, markets are just like this beautiful organism with all the different cells of the body transmitting the information, like our nervous system, just transmitting information and coming together. And no one cell knows what the heck is going on in this body. It's not like there's some magic cell, the pituitary or whatever. There's not like some magic command center. And even if there was, it wouldn't be a single cell. It'd be, so it's like my finger doesn't really know what's happening in my brain. But it all comes together, and the same with the marketplace. I think where the non-responsibility comes in is that people kind of get detached from what the way a market can exist in the first place is through property rights, and property rights come through law. And so there's the entire sphere of law, which is necessary and has to be working. Rule of law has to be working in order for there to be property rights, so that people can exchange in a non-violent way, where I'm not going to just take your stuff. There's certain rules. The rules set up this marketplace, and then the calculation can happen on this human scale. So it does divorce people from that responsibility, because it happens kind of in this different sphere of law, and we don't think of law and markets as maybe being together until something bad happens, and then I'm like, I'm gonna sue that guy. So I don't totally agree with what he's saying here, but I think I get his point. Let's see, what else does he talk about? I'm going to admit, I was listening in the audiobook format, and I fell asleep for a couple chapters and decided I just was going to skip those ones. I missed a couple chapters in the middle. Let's read a little bit more. I've talked about the religion of economics, the idol worship of material possessions, of consumption, and the so-called standard of living. So there he goes, kind of hitting hard against consumption again. And this is one of the things I think about with his book, is that he also mentions it kind of right at the end, that maybe what we need is a new religion or a new philosophy, because a lot of his suggestions and ideas are like, well, what we should do is we should value this. The subtitle, Economics as if People Mattered, like that somehow everything will be different if we kind of think about it differently, like if we kind of have a different philosophy and stuff like that. And he talks a lot about the things that are non-economic, like priceless things, like, a beautiful sunset or a wonderful interaction with a person. It's just, you can't put a value or a price on that. And that's where I think he is sort of dipping into the wishful thinking realm. I guess what I would think, if you were to try to put it maybe back into economic terms, what he's talking about is creating norms, as far as I can tell, creating norms where there's a norm that we maybe do things differently. We interact differently in the marketplace, something like that, like the Buddhist economics. What he's talking about there is Buddhist norms, Buddhist philosophy. It is a religion, and that comes in, and that kind of changes the way people interact economically or in the market. And what I guess I would add is that he could take that a step further, add that to his first chapter, and say, hey, norms are capital. Our norms are our capital. They're something that needs to be protected, not consumed. We don't get to just consume our norms, which is like basically all those people and I used to be one of these people, by the way, that's like, I want to break the rules just because it's fun to break the rules. That's, in a sense, consuming your capital, your norm capital. I think that would be a great addition. I wonder if he had ever thought of that. I wonder if, you could have written him a letter and been like, hey, bro, what about this? Maybe that would have added something beautiful here, because it's not like norms don't just crop up. You don't just say, hey, we should do this, and this idea that frustrates me too is the idea, well, it starts with you, it starts with a single person. So I just need to live by this norm, and that's how norms are created. And I think that's a little like, that's kind of the idea of like, well, the way to fight climate change is I'm going to have a low carbon footprint and I'm not going to drive. But it's like, the problem is so far beyond me. Like how much I drive or whatever is such a small amount compared to like uh, jet planes and billions of people on the planet and all this stuff. So like, am I going to change norms just by me acting a little different? Like maybe a little bit on that small level. Uh, but at some point, there has to be a way to protect norms, to create the insulation around a culture and nurture that culture moving forward. So I'll say that about that. The last thing I wanted to add is that I had 2 books I read / listened to. So I listen to the audiobooks sometimes. Last year, I think it was Brian Ward Perkins' The Fall of Rome, and then sort of rebuttal, Charlemagne and Muhammad Revisited. I want to say something like Emmett Scott or something, an author. But Brian Ward Perkins talks about the fall of Rome, and he focuses a lot on pottery and the Roman pottery, and it made it all the way to England, and it was everywhere, and it was this mass market, beautiful pottery that was all over the place. And then Rome collapsed, and it's just like gone, just boom, gone. And so much of his thesis is based on pottery that then he concludes like the economy just collapsed. This was massive, just failure on such a huge scale. And this kind of rebuttal of Charlemagne and Muhammad Revisited, because then there was a previous book, Charlemagne and Muhammad. Anyways, he's kind of saying like, hey, what happened is maybe the mass market economy, the McDonald's got shut down, but small is beautiful, that actually created more demand for artisan goods. And so there was actually higher quality crafts that replaced it. And the argument's a lot deeper than that, but I think there's something really cool there that is important, that I like. This mass market thing has just gotten even a step further with COVID, when they just shut down all the small businesses, so everyone had to shop online, and Amazon just blast through this stratosphere where everyone just, and I'm unfortunately an Amazon user myself, and so why go to the brick and mortar when you can just push a button and it shows up at your door? So if you can imagine all that collapsing, and then you have to go back to where you actually buy something that lasts your entire lifetime. Wouldn't that be amazing? Instead of some imported junk that just falls apart in a couple years. It actually sounds nice. I would like some quality in my life again. And so to that extent, small is beautiful, and I'm going to leave it with that, and take that into your life, see what you think. Like I said, this is just a very brief overview. There's a lot more in the book than what I just went over, and I'm sure I missed some parts or messed up some parts. If you've read the book, correct me, let me know what you think. Did any of this occur to you when you were reading it? Or if you had a completely different idea, let me know. Do I recommend the book? It's not my favorite economics book. Obviously, if you're totally new to Economics in One Lesson by Hazlitt is just such a great start. And there's more that I would recommend past that. This one would be pretty far down the list, but not horrible either. Some pluses and minuses. Small is beautiful.